What's up mga ka-watchers? This is your Sir Nikolai, and today I'm going to talk about myth. Alright, so let's answer the question, what is myth? So, like the word literature, myth is a very difficult word to define because it has many definitions. But in this lecture, I'm going to talk about two definitions. The first one is that myth is the opposite of truth. Myth as fiction. With this definition, myth is being associated with falsehood, meaning it is just a product of man's imagination. So if someone says it is just a myth, or that thing is just a myth, or that story is just a myth, it means that it is not true, it is not real. It is because the word myth comes from the Greek word mythos, which means stories or narratives passed from one generation to another through oral traditions. Now, when humans invented the technology of writing, these oral traditions were transferred or converted into writing. And that is why we have now traditional literature. All right? These traditional literatures are stories originally written in ancient forms of writing, such as hieroglyphics, cuneiform tablets, and ancient manuscripts. So, examples of these stories that are written in these ancient forms are, like, for example, in Mesopotamian mythology, you have Enuma Elish, that is their creation myth. Also, the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of and you have the 12 Labors of Hercules in Greek mythology and the Trojan War. So, these stories can be found originally in these ancient forms of writing and the different artifacts. But you have to keep in mind, myth is communal, right? It has no single author, right? So if you will read, let's say you have Rick Riordan's The Lightning Thief. So this story is not actually a myth, but this is a modern story based on myths. So another example is Homer, all right? His Iliad and Odyssey are just recreations of a much older oral tradition, a recreation of existing Greek myths. So Homer is not the inventor or the originator of of a Greek mythology. So in this context, myth's origin is untraceable. All right, it has many versions, and one version is no truer than the other. All versions are acceptable. So, while I admire these ancient narratives, even if I'm admirer of these great stories, but this kind of definition of myth is narrow and small-minded. But this is not the focus of my study today. This is not the focus of my lecture today. As a great admirer of myth, I don't like this definition, that myth is just a fictive story or the opposite of truth. Because though myths most of the time are exaggerated events, still, I believe that these stories, these ancient stories, have truths embedded in its structure. All right, there is a truth behind these stories. Okay, so this leads us to the next definition of myth. And this is, of course, myth is not the opposite of truth. So in what sense myth is not the opposite of truth? What do I mean by this? So a historical event may start with a factual retelling of its events. So over time, this event may be exaggerated. In this state, history becomes a legendary occurrence. When this legendary occurrence creates a belief system, for example, or a movement, then this legendary occurrence stops to function as a mere story and starts to function as a myth. As these stories are mythicized, these myths become schematics of our behavior. So any story that can function as a map of behavior can be considered as a myth. In this sense, myth is very important and fundamental in human affairs. So, this brings us to the question, what gives myth the power to convert words into actions? All right? Is it because of its structure? Is it because of it is entertaining? Is it because of the aesthetic tenets of the myth? Or is it because of the lessons that we can extract from these stories? So these are the questions that we have to answer in order for us to fully understand the nature of myth. All right? And we will answer these questions next week. All right? Because I have to